For nearly a century, the Murdaugh name commanded respect and fear in the Lowcountry of South Carolina. The family's reputation was built on generations of power, influence, and control over the local legal system. Their story begins long before recent tragedies, rooted in a time when a single family could shape the destiny of an entire region. In 1920, Randolph Murdaugh Sr. took on the role of solicitor for the 14th Judicial Circuit, overseeing criminal cases across 5 counties. This position was passed on to his son and later his grandson, so that for 3 consecutive generations, a Murdaugh was at the helm of prosecutions. With this authority, the family influenced outcomes and decided the fates of those who crossed paths with the law. In parallel, they operated a successful law firm that generated substantial revenue through civil litigation. The combination of legal power and financial clout made them untouchable to many. Throughout the decades, whispers and rumors spread that the Murdaughs enjoyed privileges and benefits that shielded them from the consequences others had to face. Allegations abounded that when a member of the family found himself in trouble, his issues were quietly erased from public record. In the backdrop of this long-standing power, the Murdaughs maintained an opulent lifestyle that was both admired and envied. Their holdings included a sprawling 1,700-acre estate in Islandton, South Carolina, where lavish parties, extravagant hunting trips, and demonstrations of wealth were commonplace. The properties they owned served not only as symbols of their affluence, but also as reminders that they operated under a different set of rules. The culture within the family reinforced a belief that responsibility and accountability were not meant for them. In particular, Paul Murdaugh, a young man raised with the conviction that his actions would always be defended, became notorious for his reckless behavior. His reputation for heavy drinking and erratic conduct was widely known in the community. Even as he repeatedly found himself in dangerous situations, there was a sense that no matter how severe the misstep, the family's intervention would always come in time. The fateful night of February 23, 2019, marked a turning point that would cast a long shadow over the family's legacy. Paul Murdaugh, accompanied by his closest friends and including the 19-year-old Mallory Beach, set out to celebrate a birthday. Rather than opting for a conventional ride, the group chose to travel by boat along the Beaufort River, a decision that would soon have irreversible consequences. Prior to boarding the vessel, they had enjoyed an evening of socializing, dining, and acquiring additional drinks from various stops. Although it was clear to those around him that Paul had consumed far more alcohol than was safe, he insisted on taking the helm of the boat. His friends, alarmed by his behavior and aware of his volatile state, repeatedly urged him to slow down and heed caution, yet their warnings went unheeded. Under the cloak of night, the boat cut through the dark, churning waters of the river. Paul's inebriated condition made his driving erratic, and his control over the vessel slipped as he steered carelessly. Despite the palpable tension among his companions, he continued with a casual disregard for the mounting risks. At approximately 2:20 a.m., tragedy struck when the speeding boat collided violently with a bridge piling. The impact was catastrophic. Forces that no one could have anticipated sent the passengers crashing around the cabin. In the ensuing chaos, screams rang out, and the sound of destruction filled the air. Amid the confusion, one fact emerged with stark clarity. Mallory Beach was nowhere to be found. Her disappearance sent shockwaves through the group. Anthony Cook, Mallory's boyfriend, was overwhelmed by a mix of panic and desperation. He searched frantically, calling her name into the cold, dark night and plunging into the freezing waters, but she was nowhere to be seen. Soon after, the authorities were alerted as rescue teams arrived on the scene. Despite their best efforts, scouring the riverbanks, deploying divers, and utilizing helicopters, the search initially yielded no sign of Mallory. The overwhelming current and murky conditions complicated the recovery efforts, and the community was left to grapple with the devastating uncertainty of her fate. In the hours that followed, the survivors of the crash huddled together in shock and disbelief along the riverbank. Their clothes soaked and spirits shaken, they struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what had happened. Meanwhile, Paul Murdaugh himself appeared almost indifferent to the disaster he had precipitated. His demeanor remained calm and detached, in stark contrast to the terror and sorrow etched on the faces of those around him. While Anthony Cook confronted him with exasperation and grief, accusing him of being responsible for the night's events. Paul offered only a dismissive smirk, as though he held a secret or possessed an unfathomable sense of entitlement. It was a moment that would later be scrutinized in courtrooms and public debates, symbolizing the deep-seated culture of privilege that had long insulated the Murdaughs from accountability. At the hospital where the injured were taken, the presence of the Murdaugh family was unmistakable. Alex Murdaugh, Paul's father, and his father before him made their way through the corridors, not merely to attend to their son's condition, but to assert control over the unfolding narrative. Their actions were deliberate, as they engaged with hospital staff and law enforcement officials in an effort to shape the investigation from its earliest moments. The subtle pressure they applied to witnesses, urging them to remain silent about certain details, soon became apparent. While many in the community began to question the fairness of the treatment afforded to Paul, it was evident that the family was orchestrating a cover story that would later come under intense scrutiny. As news of Mallory's disappearance and the boat crash spread, the community braced for the inevitable public outcry. For 6 long days, Mallory's family and friends endured a prolonged period of anguish and uncertainty. Divers continued to search the river, and the hope that she might still be found dwindled with each passing hour. Finally, on March 3, 2019, a boater noticed something amiss along a marshy riverbank. The discovery of Mallory's body, carried downstream by the relentless current, confirmed the worst fears of all involved. The revelation sent ripples of sorrow and indignation throughout the Lowcountry, for this was no ordinary accident. It was a tragedy intertwined with a legacy of power and evasion of responsibility. In the wake of the incident, legal proceedings were initiated against Paul Murdaugh. In April 2019, he faced charges related to boating under the influence, including counts that held him responsible for the fatal outcome and the serious injuries sustained by his companions. In a scene that further exemplified the family's preferential treatment, Paul was never handcuffed, nor was his photograph taken by police. Instead, he was allowed to walk into court, enter a plea of not guilty, and secure his release on bond. This sequence of events raised serious questions about whether the Murdaugh name, with its long history of influence, was shielding him from the consequences that would normally follow such reckless behavior. While the criminal investigation proceeded at a pace that many considered glacial, Mallory Beach's family, determined to seek justice for their daughter, pursued a civil remedy. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit not only against Paul, but also extended their allegations to include Alex Murdaugh and his close associate, Curtis' cousin Eddie Smith. The legal action was not merely about obtaining monetary compensation. It was an effort to expose the systemic abuses of power that had allowed the tragedy to occur without proper accountability. As the lawsuit progressed, it became clear that the case was evolving into a broader indictment of a family that had long evaded the full weight of justice. As the community grappled with the fallout from the boat crash and Mallory's untimely death, another series of events began to dramatically shift the public narrative. On the night of June 7, 2021, at precisely 10:07 p.m., a distressing 911 call emanated from the Murdaugh family's expansive estate in Islanden. The call, made by Alex Murdaugh himself, carried a tone of desperation and terror. In a trembling voice, he informed the dispatcher that both his wife and son had been gravely injured by gunfire. When law enforcement arrived at the scene, the grim reality became painfully apparent. Near the area designated for the family's dog kennels, Paul Murdaugh, who had once been at the center of the boat crash controversy, lay lifeless, having suffered 2 fatal shotgun wounds, one to the chest and another to the head. Mere feet away, Maggie Murdaugh, Paul's mother, had also been struck down, having received multiple gunshot injuries from a high-powered rifle. The brutal nature of the double homicide sent shockwaves through an already traumatized community. Immediately, the questions began to multiply. Who would want to end the lives of 2 members of a family that had wielded so much power, and what motive could be behind such a targeted act? As details of the crime surfaced, speculation ran rampant. Some argued that Paul's pending criminal trial had made him a vulnerable target, while others posited that the murders were a deliberate act of retribution for the many wrongs attributed to the Murdaugh family over the years. Yet, as investigators examined the circumstances, another unsettling possibility emerged. Could Alex Murdaugh, the patriarch, who had long been seen as a protector of his family, have been involved in orchestrating the tragedy? Initially, Alex projected the image of a grieving husband and father. He maintained that at the time of the shooting, he had been on a visit to care for his elderly mother, who was suffering from Alzheimer's, and that upon his return he discovered the horrific scene. However, inconsistencies soon surfaced in his account. No signs of forced entry or disturbance were found at the estate, suggesting that the victims had known their assailant. The staging of the crime scene appeared methodical and calculated, as if designed to mislead investigators. Furthermore, the long-standing history of secretive dealings and questionable actions by the Murdaugh family only deepened suspicions about the true nature of the incident. In the following months, Alex Murdaugh's life took an even darker turn. On September 4, 2021, he became the subject of another alarming incident. While on a rural road, he reported that he had been shot in the head while changing a tire. This incident, however, was eventually revealed to be part of a larger web of deceit. Alex later confessed that he had arranged for a former client, Curtis' cousin Eddie Smith, to carry out a staged attack on himself. The motive behind this elaborate ruse was tied to an insurance scheme. By orchestrating his own shooting, Alex hoped that his surviving son, Buster, would be able to collect a $10 million life insurance payout. At that juncture, Alex was facing mounting legal and financial pressures due to revelations of fraud, embezzlement, and financial crimes that had plagued his law firm. Investigations later uncovered that he had misappropriated millions from the firm and its clients, including funds that were intended for the family of his long-serving housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, a woman whose mysterious death at the Murdaugh estate had long been a subject of controversy. As the investigation into the murders of Paul and Maggie intensified, compelling evidence began to link Alex Murdaugh directly to the crimes. In July 2022, a Snapchat video surfaced, captured by Paul mere minutes before his death. This video placed Alex at the scene, directly contradicting his earlier alibi. The growing body of evidence eventually compelled law enforcement to formally charge Alex Murdaugh with the murders. The prosecution argued that he had committed the acts not only to divert attention from his financial misdeeds, but also to suppress emerging evidence that could have implicated the family in a wider range of crimes. In January 2023, Alex's trial commenced, and over the course of several weeks, witnesses testified about his shifting accounts and the damning forensic evidence, including gunshot residue and the incriminating Snapchat video. On March 2, 2023, the jury returned a guilty verdict, sentencing Alex Murdaugh to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. With this outcome, the once formidable Murdaugh dynasty, long believed to be invincible, found its power and influence irrevocably broken. Even as the family's legal battles unfolded in the public arena, the ramifications of their actions extended far beyond the immediate tragedies. Investigators began to re-examine several cold cases that had long been linked to the Murdaugh family. One such case was that of Stephen Smith, a 19-year-old nursing student whose death in 2015 had initially been dismissed as a hit-and-run. However, renewed scrutiny revealed details that were inconsistent with the official explanation. Smith's injuries, marked by signs of blunt force trauma, suggested that he had been attacked rather than simply struck by a vehicle. Rumors emerged hinting at a possible connection between his death and Buster Murdaugh, Alex's surviving son. Allegations surfaced that Smith had been involved in a secret relationship with Buster, a relationship that, if exposed, might have threatened to tarnish the family's reputation. While definitive proof of this connection remained elusive, the reopening of the case by the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, rekindled public interest and renewed calls for a thorough investigation. Another tragic chapter in the Murdaugh saga involved Gloria Satterfield, the long-serving housekeeper who had been a fixture in the family for over 2 decades. Gloria had been regarded as part of the extended family, and her untimely death in February 2018 was initially explained as a fatal accident, a fall on the estate's front steps. The family had assured Gloria's loved ones that she had died as a result of an unfortunate mishap, even going so far as to file an insurance claim on her behalf. However, subsequent investigations revealed a more disturbing reality. It emerged that Alex Murdaugh had covertly diverted the entire $4.3 million settlement that was meant for Gloria's sons. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community and underscored the extent to which the family's influence had been used to manipulate not only legal outcomes, but also financial settlements. In 2022, after a prolonged legal battle, Gloria's sons eventually secured a multi-million-dollar settlement. Still, the controversy left lingering doubts about whether the circumstances surrounding her death had been properly examined. As the layers of deception and misconduct were exposed, investigators discovered that Alex Murdaugh had engaged in a vast network of fraud and embezzlement. Over the years, he had siphoned off more than $8.7 million from his law firm, targeting vulnerable clients such as widows and injured workers. These funds were used to finance a lifestyle marked by luxury trips, elite educational expenses, and personal indulgences. The scale of his financial crimes was staggering, and it painted a picture of a man who had exploited his position for personal gain while leaving a trail of ruined lives in his wake. Even as the legal proceedings against him advanced, the public's perception of the Murdaugh family transformed from one of reluctant admiration to outright condemnation. Among those left to contend with the fallout was Buster Murdaugh, the last remaining member of the family not directly implicated by a conviction. Buster, who had maintained a low profile throughout the tumultuous events, found himself under increasing scrutiny as evidence mounted regarding the family's internal workings. Though he had long defended his father and expressed steadfast loyalty, questions about his role in the broader cover-ups and potential involvement in other questionable incidents began to emerge. The community, still reeling from the series of tragedies, looked to Buster as the potential key to further understanding the extent of the family's misdeeds. As the legal and investigative processes continued, the narrative of the Murdaugh saga grew even more complex. Every new piece of evidence brought with it fresh inquiries about the family's past. The boat crash that had taken Mallory Beach's life, which initially appeared to be an isolated event of youthful recklessness, became a symbol of a much larger system of privilege and impunity. The subsequent murders of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh, the staged attack on Alex, and the web of financial crimes all coalesced into a story that seemed to reflect a broader cultural malaise, one in which power, wealth, and influence had long been allowed to override the principles of fairness and justice. Throughout these developments, the voices of the victims' families resonated strongly in public discourse. Mallory Beach's parents, shattered by the loss of their daughter, became emblematic of the struggle for accountability in a system where the powerful had traditionally been shielded from responsibility. Their pursuit of justice through a wrongful death lawsuit was not merely about seeking compensation, it was a call for transparency and change. Similarly, the family of Stephen Smith, whose death had been relegated to the background for too long, demanded that the truth about his demise be fully addressed. Even the relatives of Gloria Satterfield, who had been quietly marginalized in the aftermath of her tragic fall, joined the chorus calling for an exhaustive investigation into the Murdaugh legacy. In the months following Alex Murdaugh's conviction, the community found itself caught in a state of cautious optimism mixed with lingering sorrow. While the downfall of the Murdaugh dynasty represented a significant moment of reckoning, many felt that the scars left behind by decades of abuse of power would take much longer to heal. The reopening of cold cases, the renewed scrutiny of past incidents, and the continuing legal battles all underscored that the process of seeking justice was far from complete. Even from within his prison cell, Alex Murdaugh managed to remain a controversial figure. His prison interviews and statements hinted at hidden details and unsolved mysteries, suggesting that there might be more to the story than had been revealed so far. Over time, the effects of the Murdaugh case extended beyond the immediate tragedies to impact the entire region. Local law enforcement agencies underwent internal reviews, and calls for reform grew louder as residents demanded that the influence of powerful families be curtailed. The case served as a stark reminder that unchecked authority could have dire consequences for ordinary citizens. Community meetings, televised discussions, and a surge in investigative journalism all contributed to an atmosphere of heightened vigilance and determination to ensure that no one would ever again be able to operate above the law without scrutiny. Despite the profound changes taking place, many questions remained. Was the series of events, spanning a fatal boat crash, a double homicide, and a cascade of financial and legal irregularities an isolated phenomenon, or did it represent a pattern that had affected numerous lives over generations? Could there be other instances where the Murdaugh name had shielded individuals from accountability? The re-examination of Stephen Smith's case, for instance, opened the door to reconsidering the circumstances surrounding his death. The initial ruling of a hit and run was now being questioned, and forensic experts were being called in to reassess evidence that had long been dismissed. Similarly, the case of Gloria Satterfield continued to be a source of controversy, with many arguing that her death had been mishandled from the start. In recent developments, authorities announced that Stephen Smith's death was being reclassified as a homicide, a decision that underscored the persistent doubts about the official narratives that had been provided in the past. Investigators began revisiting every detail of the case, re-interviewing witnesses and reviewing forensic reports that had been previously overlooked. This renewed effort to re-examine the past was seen by many as a necessary step in addressing the long history of injustice that had been allowed to flourish under the protective shadow of the Murdaugh name. At the same time, attention turned toward the possibility that the crimes committed by the family might have involved more individuals than had initially been suspected. Speculation circulated that Alex Murdaugh, even as he served his life sentence, might have had accomplices, individuals who had aided him in covering up the truth and ensuring that the family's dark secrets remained hidden for so long. Some theories even pointed to the involvement of local officials and law enforcement officers who might have been complicit in protecting the family's interests. Although definitive evidence was still lacking, these allegations further deepened the sense of betrayal felt by many in the community. Buster Murdaugh, now the last remaining member of the once powerful clan, not yet convicted of any crime, found himself at the center of mounting suspicion. His quiet demeanor and continued reluctance to step into the public spotlight only fueled further speculation about his knowledge of or involvement in the series of events that had brought the family to ruin. Critics questioned whether he had been complicit in covering up key details of the incidents, or whether he had simply been a passive observer in a situation that spiraled out of control. As the investigation continued and more documents and testimonies came to light, Buster's role in the overall narrative became a focal point of public debate. In reflecting on the legacy of the Murdaugh family, one cannot ignore the profound impact their actions have had on the community. The tragic loss of Mallory Beach, the untimely deaths of Paul and Maggie, and the extensive financial crimes perpetrated by Alex Murdaugh are all interwoven into a tapestry of sorrow, anger, and determination for change. The case has spurred discussions about reform in the legal and law enforcement systems of the region, prompting citizens and officials alike to reconsider how power is distributed and held accountable. For many, it stands as a cautionary tale of what can occur when a family's wealth and influence are allowed to override the fundamental principles of justice and fairness. In the end, the story of the Murdaughs is a complex narrative filled with tragedy, deception, and a profound loss of trust. It is a narrative that touches on themes of family loyalty, the corruption of power, and the enduring human desire for accountability. While Alex Murdaugh's conviction marked a significant turning point, the repercussions of his actions continue to be felt. The ongoing investigations into other cases associated with the family and the persistent efforts by victims' families to obtain justice ensure that this chapter of South Carolina's history remains far from closed. Every new piece of evidence, every reopened file, and every public hearing adds another layer to a saga that has long been shrouded in secrecy. As the community moves forward, there remains a collective hope that the lessons learned from this dark period will lead to meaningful reforms. Residents continue to demand that no family, regardless of its historical influence, be allowed to operate with impunity. The painful experiences of those who lost loved ones or suffered under the weight of injustice serve as a reminder that transparency, accountability, and empathy must form the basis of any legal system. In this atmosphere of cautious optimism, the voices of the victims and their families are being heard, and efforts are underway to prevent similar abuses of power in the future. Even now, as investigators scrutinize every detail of the cases linked to the Murdaughs, community members gather at town meetings and public forums to express their concerns and hopes for a better future. Their conversations are marked by a determination to see that every question is answered and every injustice addressed. The legacy of the Murdaugh family, with all its complexity and controversy, will undoubtedly be remembered for generations to come, not just as a story of crime and punishment, but as a turning point that led to a broader societal awakening. Today, as the dust begins to settle on one of the most talked about criminal sagas in modern history, the pursuit of truth continues. The work of investigators, journalists, and community advocates moves forward with an unwavering commitment to uncovering every detail. Whether it is through re-examined evidence, fresh testimony, or rigorous legal scrutiny, the hope is that a complete and honest account of the events will eventually emerge. For the families who have endured unspeakable losses, this pursuit represents not only a means of achieving justice, but also a way to honor the memory of those whose lives were cut tragically short. The journey toward resolution is long and fraught with challenges, yet it is driven by a belief that the truth, in all its painful clarity, must be brought to light. The Murdaugh saga stands as a powerful reminder that no one, regardless of their social standing or influence, is above the law. And as each new chapter is written in the annals of this case, the enduring message is one of accountability, the importance of ethical leadership, and the resilience of communities in the face of injustice. This narrative, stretching from the early days of legal dominance to the dramatic events that shattered an empire, is a testimony to the enduring impact of human actions. It is a story of lives forever changed by the pursuit of power and the eventual reckoning that followed. The Murdaugh case may have reached a critical juncture with the conviction of Alex, but for those who continue to seek justice for Mallory, for Stephen, for Gloria, and for all the victims caught in the crossfire, the work is far from finished. In their collective memory and ongoing struggle, the true legacy of this family is defined not by the wealth and influence they once wielded, but by the determination of a community to restore faith in a system that, at its worst, can be manipulated by the few at the expense of the many. As you listen to this account, you are reminded of the fragility of human institutions and the cost of unchecked authority. The tragedy that began with a night of irresponsible behavior on a boat has cascaded into a series of events that have touched countless lives. And while the final chapters of this saga have yet to be written, one thing remains clear: the community's demand for justice and reform will continue to shape the future. Every conversation, every investigation, and every legal proceeding adds to the collective effort to ensure that the dark days of the past serve as a foundation for a fairer, more accountable future. In this extended account, the story of the Murdaughs is told not as a series of isolated incidents, but as a continuous narrative. A story that reflects the complexities of human behavior, the consequences of unchecked power, and the enduring need for truth. It is a chronicle that honors the memories of those lost and stands as a call to action for those who believe in the power of justice. Even as the echoes of these events continue to be heard throughout the Lowcountry, the resolve to address every misdeed remains unshaken. For in the end, it is not just the fall of a dynasty that defines this moment, but the collective determination to rebuild trust, to reform outdated systems, and to remember that every life matters. The legacy of the Murdaugh family, with all its contradictions and tragedies, is now a part of history, a cautionary tale for future generations. And as the truth continues to come forward, the lessons learned from this dark chapter will serve as a beacon for those seeking to create a more just society. The journey is ongoing, and the community's commitment to accountability will ensure that every detail, every misdeed, and every act of negligence is recorded in the annals of time. This is the story of power, of sorrow, and ultimately of hope. A hope that even the most entrenched legacies of corruption can be overcome by the unyielding pursuit of justice and the resilience of the human spirit. After hearing this full account of the Murdaugh story, we want to know what you think. Do you believe there are still unanswered questions, or that justice has finally been served? Share your theories and insights in the comments below. Your perspective is key to keeping the discussion alive. If this investigation has captured your attention and you're ready for more in-depth stories that challenge the status quo, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and tap the bell icon to be notified when our next update drops.